Welcome. Let's quickly go through common IGCSE economic mistakes to help you prepare for your paper 1. Let's begin with topic 1, the nature of economic problems. Let's begin with economics. How do we define economics? The students think that it is about how a country makes money, which is incorrect. The correct is that economics is fundamentally about how scarce resources are allocated to meet people's infinite needs and wants. That involves making rational choices. So rational choices is the key in this definition. Next is, how do we define free goods? Free goods, students think, are those provided by governments such as public roads and education, where you must keep in mind that the key characteristics of free good is that they do not have an opportunity cost. Public roads and education, even if government provided, are economic goods because their provision involves an opportunity cost. The third misconception is that economic goods are only those consumers must pay a price for, while in many cases there are economic goods that have market price. Not all, government provided healthcare, have a market price. However, all economic goods involve an opportunity cost in their provision. So you must take into account that for an economic goods, an opportunity cost is involved. Moving on to topic number 2, factors of production. Here, students make a mistake by defining land as physical land, whereas in economics, land refers to all the natural resources used in production, such as water or ingredients for product or the raw materials that we get from our farms. They are all part of physical land. The second mistake that they make is how they define the labor. That is, that labor is sometimes defined solely by the number of workers, whereas labor involves both the physical and mental human resources involved in the production process. Third, equating capital with money. Capital, as a factor of production, refers to human made resources used in production, such as machinery, tools, buildings, and equipments. Whereas money itself is not capital in this context. So you must take this into your consideration before you answer the question. Number 4, income is just the money labor receives, while the correct thing is that wages or salaries are reward for labor. Income is a broad term refer to collective rewards for all the factors of production, that is, rent for land, interest for capital, profit for enterprise, and wages for labor. Topic number 3, the opportunity cost. Defining opportunity cost as second best alternative foregone is incorrect. The correct definition is opportunity cost is specifically the next best alternative foregone when a decision is being made. Number 2, only firms face opportunity cost in production. This is incorrect. The correct is that firms like governments and individuals also act as consumers when purchasing inputs from other businesses, meaning they also face opportunity cost in these purchasing decisions. Third, wealthy individuals do not face opportunity costs. This is incorrect because due to finite resources, all decision makers, regardless of the wealth they hold, face opportunity costs because they cannot afford to acquire everything. Topic number 4, production possibility curve. It is defined by students incorrectly as showing combination of outputs, whereas PPC shows the maximum capacity output and represents combination of achievable only if all resources are used efficiently. The second misconception is that there is no opportunity cost when reallocating resources along the PPC. The correct answer for this is that opportunity cost always exists on the points along the PPC, because shifting resources to produce more of one good means producing lesser of another good. Third misconception is that an economy's PPC always shifts outwards, whereas you must understand that outward shift represents growth. In economies with detrimental events like disasters or poor policies can cause the PPC to shift inwards, indicating a decrease in the productive capacity of the economy. Let's move on to topic number 5, the microeconomics and the macroeconomics. Here, students get confused between microeconomic concept and macroeconomic concept. Let's begin with specific labor markets like teaching or retailing as macroeconomics. This is incorrect. Individual markets are the microeconomic topics, whereas the macroeconomic deals with economy-wide issues like unemployment, and its impacts are considered for the whole economy. Second, classifying poverty as a microeconomic problem because it might seem to affect a small number in rich countries, whereas poverty is a macroeconomic issue because its widespread nature and significant impact on consumption, employment, and wealth distribution across the entire economy. Moving on to topic number 6, the role of markets in allocated resources. Here students define market system as one relying on both government and private sector activity. Yes, this describes mixed economic system, whereas there is free market system also present, but it relies solely on forces of demand and supply to allocate resources. So you must understand that market system can be mixed economic system or a free market system or a command system. So you need to understand the exact market system that the question is asking you to define. Then stating the price mechanism allocates resources by charging a suitable price is incorrect. The correct is price is a market system that is determined by the interaction of demand and supply, particularly where the quantity demanded equals the quantity supplied at the equilibrium price. In this slide, we will be covering topic number 9 and topic number 10. Let's begin with price determination. Here, students mistake surplus as excess stock from producing too much, whereas excess stock, a surplus, occurs when the price is too high, specifically above the market equilibrium price, causing the quantity supplied to exceed the quantity demanded. Second, the government intervention is needed to restore equilibrium in cases of excess demand or supply. This is an incorrect concept. The correct thing is that in market system, the price mechanism itself tends to restore equilibrium automatically. The topic 10 is about price changes. Here, the students tend to link a fall in price directly to rise in demand, whereas a price fall causes an extension, that is, movement along the existing demand curve, not a shift of the entire curve, that is, a change in the demand. A shift is usually caused by non-price factors. The second misconception is a price change causes both movement along the demand curve and shift of the supply curve, whereas the correct answer for this is that price changes cause movement along both the demand and supply curves, whereas shifts are caused by changes in the non-price factors for demand and non-price factors affecting supply for supply. Price elasticity of demand. Here students mistakenly think that higher price causes quantity demanded to fall if demand is elastic, whereas quantity demanded always falls with the price increase due to law of demand. If demand is elastic, the quantity demanded falls by a greater proportion than the price increase. Secondly, in calculating price elasticity of demand, PED, using incorrect figures in the formula, the main formula being percentage change in quantity demanded over percentage change in price. So use the absolute change in quantity instead of percentage change relative to original quantity. So always keep this in mind when you put the values in the formula. Defining demand as elastic simply because there are many substitutes is only partially correct. You must take into account that demand is elastic when customers are highly responsive to price changes, which is often the case when many substitutes are available. So be mindful about it. Then a lower price always leads to more revenue for a firm. The correct understanding is that while a lower price attracts more consumers or customers, a revenue actually falls if demand is price inelastic, as the increase in quantity sold is not enough to offset the lower price per unit. Now here's ceteris paribus is the key assumption, which means if all things are kept constant. Price elasticity of supply. Here the students mistakenly define supply as elastic because there are plenty of stocks, whereas correct understanding should be supply is elastic when firms are highly responsive to price changes, which is often facilitated by having large stock, that is inventory, with the firms. Second, firms supply more when prices fall. This contradicts the law of supply. Firms have less incentive and are less willing and able to supply products at low prices. In topic number 13, which is market economic system, students tend to define public goods as those produced by public sector, which is incorrect. The correct definition is that public goods are those that the private sector has no incentive to produce. That is due to being non-excludable and non-rivalrous in nature, necessitating government intervention for their provision. Second misconcept is that market economy is better than planned economy because people have more choices. This is a subjective statement. You must take into account that more choices is the feature of the market economy, but better is subjective and excessive choices have disadvantages like advertising clutter. Topic number 14, market failure. Here student tends to define external cost as the total cost of economic activity to society as a whole, whereas social costs are total cost to society and comprises both the private costs and the external costs. Second, taxation always makes polluters pay for the pollution they create. However, the extent to which the producer can pass on a tax depends on the price elasticity of demand for that product. Third, define public goods as those produced by the public sector. The correct answer is that public goods are those that private sectors has no incentive to produce, thus requiring government intervention to provide them. Number 4, define externalities only as negative spillover effects like pollution, whereas externalities can be both positive and negative side effects of production or consumption experienced by the third parties. Moving on to topic number 15, mixed economic system. Here, defining public goods solely by their production location, that is, public sector, is incorrect. Public goods require government intervention because private firms lack the incentive to provide them. Then, market economy is better due to more choices is a subjective statement because more choices has an opportunity cost, for example, wasteful competition, and better is relative to individual perspectives. Topic number 16, money and banking. Mostly students define money as only banknotes and coins, which is incorrect. The correct definition of money is that money includes bank deposits and central bank reserves in addition to physical currency. Second, a key function of commercial banks is issuing banknotes and coins. This is incorrect. Correct answer is that this is the key function of the central bank, whereas the commercial banks are retail banks providing financial services to the consumers. Third, students think that capital equals money, that is, capital means money, which is incorrect. The correct is that capital is a factor of production, referring to human-made goods used in production, not the money used to buy them. Topic number 17, households. Here, students tend to define income as total wealth for an individual, whereas wealth includes assets and savings in addition to income, which primarily comes from wages and salaries. Second, higher interest rates lead to more saving and less spending, whereas the correct understanding should be that while this is partly true, the main reason for reducing spending is that higher interest rates increase the cost of borrowing, like the mortgages, leaving households with less disposable income. In topic number 19, which is on trade unions, students tend to define trade unions protect all workers against employers, which is incorrect. Protection is typically afforded to members of the trade union. Second, workers can simply go on strike to force employers to meet demands, whereas strike action is an extreme form of industrial action and striking workers typically do not get paid, making unions hesitant to use it to manipulate the management. Topic number 20, firms, economies, diseconomies of scale. Here, students tend to define economy scale stating firms reduce total cost by operating at a higher output level, whereas economies of scales refer to average cost of production, cost per unit, falling as the level of output increases. In topic number 21, which is firms in production, students tend to assume that paying workers more money reduces the firm's profit, whereas it increases the costs, but higher wages can boost the workers' motivation and productivity, potentially leading to higher profits that outweigh the cost increase. Secondly, hiring more labor automatically increases workforce productivity. Topic number 22. Firms, cost, revenue and objectives. Here students define the price of a good as the cost paid by the customers. The correct thing is costs relate to expenses by businesses in production, while the price is what the customer pays and is set by higher than cost for the firm to make a profit. Second, defining fixed costs as costs that don't change, whereas fixed costs are costs that do not change while the level of output in the short run, for example rent, but they can change over time, for example rent increases. In topic number 23, market structure, students tend to believe that monopolists can charge any price they want. Whereas a monopolist controls supply, they still face the market demand curve and must lower prices to sell more output. Secondly, competition is always better than monopoly because prices are lower. Here, the students must note that monopolies can sometimes achieve large economies of scale, allowing them to potentially offer goods or services at a lower cost than competitive firms. Topic number 24, the role of the government. Stating it's impossible for government to achieve macroeconomic objectives simultaneously without conflicts is incorrect. Student must note that in long run it is impossible to achieve goals like economic growth and higher employment without causing inflationary pressures or trade deficits. Moving on to topic number 25, the macroeconomic aims of the government. Here, a government cannot achieve its macroeconomic objective without conflict is incorrect. Student must note that it is possible for different macroeconomic aims to be achieved together in the long run. Topic number 26, the fiscal policy. So defining a progressive tax system as one where the rich pay more tax than the poor is incorrect. It must be noted that it is true even for flat rate system. In a progressive system, the rich pay a higher percentage rate of their income in tax. Second, calling proportional income taxes as the fairest is subjective. While a proportional tax takes the same percentage from everyone, it doesn't account for differing abilities to pay, which is why it's not universally considered the fairest. Third, fiscal policies only affect aggregate demand is incorrect. You must note that it is primarily impact on demand. Expansionary fiscal policies can have an indirect impact on the aggregate supply in the long run. The monetary policy. The students tend to define the money supply as only notes and coins. It was earlier discussed also, but I'll repeat here. Money supply is broader. It includes bank deposits and central bank reserves. The physical currency is a small portion of the total money supply. Topic number 28, supply side policy. Here, the students incorrectly claim that supply side policies have no impact on the demand. You must note that although they are long-term policies targeting productive capacity, measures like educational reforms can increase the consumption and investment expenditures, thus affecting the demand. Topic number 29, economic growth. Stating economic growth is desirable because everyone benefits equally is incorrect. While generally positive, the benefits of economic growth are not always distributed equally, leading to concerns about income inequality. So you must take this factor in account. Topic number 30, employment and unemployment. Here, the students tend to define employment as everyone in the economy having a job, which is incorrect. Employment refers to those of working age who are willing and able. So take into account that they should be willing and able to work and are currently working. Not everyone is in the labor force. Second, defining employment as people hired by businesses. Employment includes people who are self-employed as well. So you need to take the self-employed persons into account also. Topic number 31, inflation and deflation. Stating that inflation is always harmful to economy is incorrect. The low and stable rates of inflation are generally not harmful for the economy. Problems arise when inflation rises too quickly. Number two, assuming inflation affects all households equally is incorrect. While it affects everyone, the impact varies depending on the factor like household spending patterns. So you must note this point. Number three, inflation means that the price of the every good and service is rising. This is incorrect. Inflation means that the prices are rising on average. Individual price may increase at different rates or even fall. 4. Students believe that disinflation is same as deflation. This is highly incorrect concept. These are two different terms where disinflation is fall in the rate of inflation, where prices are still rising but at a slower rate, while deflation is when average prices are actually falling. Topic 32, living standards. Defining standard of living solely by average person's income is incorrect. The correct definition of standard of living is that it covers the social and economic well-being, including factors like access to education and healthcare, including income. Second, assuming countries with the highest GDP, which is gross domestic product, necessarily have the highest standard of living is not always true. Standard of living also depends on factors like GDP per capita, income distribution, and rate of inflation. So students must define standard of living correctly. Topic 33, poverty. Generalizing that people in less developed countries have a low standard of living is incorrect. Economic development and living standard classifications are subjective, and higher income doesn't guarantee greater standard of living. Second, claiming poverty exists only in poor or low income countries is false. Poverty exists in all countries, though it is more widespread in less developed countries. Inequalities are events like recessions can cause significant poverty even in a wealthy country. So students must note this point also. Third, assuming someone earning above average income in an economy cannot experience absolute poverty is incorrect. Whereas in economies with very low GDP per capita, even those earning more than average may struggle to meet the basic needs, thus experiencing absolute poverty. Topic 34, population. Defining net migration solely by the difference between immigrant and emigrant workers is incorrect. The net migration rate measures the overall population change from migration and includes all types of migrants, not just workers. Topic 35, difference in economic development between countries. Workers in the tertiary sector always earn more than those in the primary sector is significant overgeneralization. The correct understanding should be earnings vary widely within the sectors, and some primary sector jobs like oil riggers can be higher paying than some tertiary sector jobs like cashiers. Topic 36, international specialization. Defining specialization as division of labor among workers is incorrect. Specialization also applies to capital equipment, firms, regional areas, and countries. Second, specialization is always expensive due to high wages for skilled workers. However, some specialized roles are high paying. Specialization exists across various skills levels and not all require high wages. Topic 37, globalization, free trade and protection. Here, students tend to confuse between international trade as a free trade. You must know that free trade means trading without imposed barriers. Not all international trade is free trade. There are barriers like tariffs, quotas that do apply to international trade. Topic 38, Foreign exchange rates. Here, the students tend to confuse consumers and firms lose out from a stronger exchange rate. You must note that some may lose, others, like the firms selling price inelastic goods or consumer buying imports, may gain from a stronger currency. Topic 39, Current account of balance of payment. Here, defining exports as solely selling goods overseas is incomplete. Exports involves the flow of money and includes both goods and services consumed by foreign consumers. Then, a current account deficit is inherently bad for a country. It's a completely incorrect concept. You must note that a manageable current account deficit can stem from strong economic growth and allows residents to access quality imports. Thirdly, believing a current account surplus is always better is incorrect. A surplus could result from protectionist trade policies, limiting imports, and potentially lowering the living standard. Fourth, a current account surplus is same as a government budget surplus. It is a completely big mistake if you are considering that they are the same. A current account surplus relates to international transactions, while the budget surplus relates to government revenue and expenditure. So keep this point very clear. And that's a quick run through of common mistakes. Focus on precise definitions and understanding the why. Good luck. For one-to-one consultation, you can contact me on my WhatsApp, which is +96656945323, or you can contact me on my email, which is aisha.kamran.sadiki@gmail.com. Wish you all good luck.